David Edmondson explains the 20 by 20 method.
Right, so let's go through the 20-20 method stage by stage. First stage, remind ourselves of the game that we're playing. Football is an invasion game. The idea of the game is to score in the other team's goal, which they will defend in their half of the pitch. So we look to move into their territory, put the ball in the goal. As mentioned before, this has 6 tasks involved in football. 3 in possession: keep the ball away from the other team, move forward towards the other team's goal, and score goals. Out of possession: win the ball back if you can. If not, stop the other team from playing forwards. And if you can't do that, protect your goal. So they are the 6 tasks required of teams and players when they play football. Once we've established the 6 tasks, we then have to look at what are the team's intentions. What are we trying to do as a team and individuals? So in the team intentions, there's 8 things in a order that we're trying to do. 4 in possession, 4 out of possession. So in possession, our number 1 priority is to exploit the space behind the opposition defence. If we can't get into that space, can we get into the space behind the opposition's midfield? Excuse me. And if you can't get into the space behind the opposition's midfield, can you get into the space behind the opposition's forwards? If we can't get into that space, then can we exploit the space in front of the opposition's forwards to create opportunities to get in to their team shape and progress up the pitch? Out of possession, number 1 priority is to close the middle of the pitch and to keep the opposition in front of our forward line. If we can't do that, we want to close the centre of the pitch and keep them in front of the midfield line. And if we can't do that, we want to close the centre of the pitch and keep them in front of the defence. If we can't do that, then we want to close the centre of the pitch behind the defence, which would involve recovering back and getting in front of them again. They are our team intentions. We then have individual intentions. What are individuals trying to do at moments in the game? Again, there's 8 of these. 4 in possession, 4 out of possession. So the 4 in possession: improving progress options. So you're playing in the space on or around the ball, and you are trying to make a move that moves a player away and improves a different option for the ball to be played to. Second option is becoming a progress option. So you're looking to be the player that's trying to receive the ball to keep the play going forwards. Third option is you're the player on the ball and you're looking to progress it. So you're looking to move it forwards by either passing to a teammate or taking it yourself. And the final one is improving progress conditions. So what that means is that they're for the players more away from the ball, that they're trying to stretch and move opposition players away from the ball to give a bit more space on and around the ball to make it a bit easier to play. Out of possession, there's 4 again. So preventing ball progress, that's the person who's actually going to go and press the ball. So you're actually trying to stop the person on the ball from playing it forwards. If you're not doing that, are you denying a progress option? So that means that you're marking players around the ball, so you're trying to make it so that they can't pass to them. The next one is worsening a progress option. So that would be players that aren't necessarily marking players but have come nearer to the ball to compact the space and are making it trickier to play. And then worsening the progress condition is the players that are further away from the ball, but those players coming in to compact the team shape to try and make everything tight and difficult to play in for the team with the ball. So that gives us our individual intentions. So whenever we're playing and whenever we're watching what's happening and trying to make decisions, we're normally trying to do one of these things. So the zone, the 20 by 20 that the method refers to. So set up now, put out 4 cones that are one of the 20 by 20 zones on the pitch. When we're in our first stage that we'll talk about in a little bit, of where we're learning to win the zone, we just work in a single zone. So when we do that, we would split that zone into quarters. And the reason that we would do that is to support players with recognising space. So recognising that when you're playing, if you move here to receive, the ball comes in and the player comes with you, that you've got this options here that you can use for space. Take the ball in there, for example, and spin. Also something as simple as if you get the ball here and you get turned and you're running at the player who comes across here, that you recognise the space is opening in there. Okay, that's just a example of it as a 1v1, and we'll go on to how we add more players into it and build it up a little bit more as well. But that's the zone, 20 by 20, and when we're working in a singular zone, we would split that into quarters, as I said, to help with recognising space. Right, so how do the zones translate to the pitch? I'm just going to do this on half a pitch. Both halves are the same. So each half of the pitch, from the halfway line to the top of the penalty area, is split into 6 zones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So they're the zones that we're looking at to play. Obviously we want to try and get into the final third, which is beyond the line. So how do we split this final third up? Put a line there, a line there. So here, when we're attacking, is a crossing zone. Same on the other side. And then here is the key zone. That's the goal zone. Research shows, and this is FA research, not mine, 90% of all goals in all levels of football are scored from within the goal zone. The only thing that changes as you go from a kids game to a professional game is that in the professional game there are more assists and the goal scorer normally finishes with 1 touch. In children's games, there's less assists and the goal scorer normally has more touches because the kids are more likely to dribble in there. So that is the half that we're attacking. If we were to look at it from a defending point of view, in our half here, it'd be exactly the same 6 squares. The only thing is, in our goal zone, that would be our protect the goal, is what we'd be looking to do. And in the wide crossing zones, we'd be looking to stop the cross. So both halves the same, both with the same splits. And this is where our little zones come in that we're looking to win. So what is the 20 by 20 method? It's a 5-stage process that increases in complexity and takes the zone that we've talked about, teaches the players some principles to try and win the zone, and then starts to add zones together to build up to the team. So the 5 stages are 1, extreme technique, where we're looking to build the players' movement skills and their abilities with the ball so that they can play with their head up. Second is positional 1v1. So that's doing 1v1s in the positions on the pitch where they occur. So wide 1v1s, central 1v1s, midfield 1v1s, striker versus centre-back 1v1s. Battles that will happen on the pitch and learning to try and win those. Stage 3 is winning the zone. That's when we start to add in the players around that player. So again, if it's the centre forward with a centre back, we may add in another centre back or another striker or a 10, and then we might add in some of the central midfielders, so that we're building the players that are on the ball and around the ball and that will play within that zone, and them learning to play together. And we then, within that, we'd be looking at decision making around, do I go alone or do I combine? We'd be looking at trying to create 2v1s and the principles around that, which I'll go into when we go into the examples of each of these. The fourth one is functions. Functions is where we would start to add zones together. So we might have the two central zones of the pitch with our centre-backs, our central midfielders and our forwards, and we're looking at playing through the middle. We might do that on the right wing or the left wing, where we've got the players that would be operating on that side of the pitch. We then go to larger functions where we've maybe got 4 zones, and we've got the middle of the pitch and the right-hand side, for example, against the middle of the pitch and the left-hand side, and we're learning to try and solve problems in those areas of the pitch. The final one is team. 2 ways we'd do that. We'd either do some sort of scenario like a phase of play, like playing out from the back, just as an example. We'd set the zones up. We wouldn't quarter the individual zones. We'd just have them as zones on the pitch. And the question we'd be asking in possession is, can we play in 6 zones as a team that are together? Who should be in which zone? And out of the individual intentions, what are you trying to do? So if you go into that zone, what's your individual intention? If you're staying away from that zone, again, what's your intention? Are you trying to keep players away? Do you think the ball's going to come out of there? And start to give the players a bit of freedom to solve problems of, if the opposition moves a load of players over to a particular zone to defend it, that might open up another zone for us to play in. So they'd be looking around the pitch in possession and deciding which zone can we attack, who should be in that zone trying to win the zone, and who should be elsewhere, either protecting us against counter-attack or giving us options if we can't get through that zone. Out of possession, the team would look to protect the middle of the pitch, because we don't want teams going through there. It's the fastest route to goal. But what we'd also be trying to do is push the opposition into a zone and to win the ball back. And again, it would be a similar question. Which zone do we want to push them to? Can we get them into that zone? And then who goes in there to try and win the ball back, and who's in the other zones, closing the space and making sure we're marked up if the opposition win the zone. Right, so this is an example of extreme technique. So we'll look at the centre forward, remove the defenders, and what we're looking at is developing the technical skills so the player can play with their head up. If they don't have to focus too much on their feet, then they can pick up more information around them. So we'd be looking at things like, for example, we might just start off with a coach playing a ball in from different distances, maybe play a longer one, maybe play a shorter one, working on receiving skills. They pop it back, for example, and then he's making a run where he gets slid in and he's going to finish in the goal. You could have a goalkeeper in if you wanted to. You don't necessarily have to have one, but you could. If I can find my goalkeepers, appear to have run away. I won't worry about that. Oh, there we go. Goalkeeper. And then what you could also do is start to build up different types of finishes that they get. So if you put a little person there, you can have finishing from a cutback. So the ball's played in, they bounce it, they feed it into there, and then they're making a run as it's cut back and finish. That person could be finishing from crosses, where you play the ball in, again it's bounced back, they're zipping the ball out to the winger, and the winger's putting in different types of crosses for them to finish. So we're practicing real game techniques that will happen around that position. You could focus your technique and your movement work on specific movements, agility, balance, coordination. You could focus it on passing, for example. My personal thought is, especially with the younger age groups, I would pick a position to focus on for a period of time. I'm going to look at skills of a centre forward, going to look at skills of a winger, look at skills of a midfielder, etc. With the older players who are more likely to have settled down to one position, I would set up the multiple zones if you've got the space, and I'd send them off to work in their zones. One of the questions you should always ask yourself with older players, not so much with the younger ones who are rotating round, but you could ask the question is, if they are a centre forward, for example, when they go home from your session, how many centre forward things have they practiced? Have they practiced receiving with the back to goal? Have they practiced shooting? If not, then is what your session's done really preparing them for the game, or is it just a generic session, which happens a lot? We've all done it, I've done it, but can we maybe be a little bit more focused? Right, positional 1v1s. Rather than doing generic 1v1s, where pressure from behind, pressure from the side and things like that, which happens and always has its place in practice, depending on space you've got available and players and things. Can we be a bit more focused and, again, teach the roles? Where does that particular role play on the pitch? What skills and what battles does it face? So in this one, if we use the example of the centre forward again, they're just going to be against the central defender, but they're going to be against them around the edge of the penalty area. It's easy to set up. If you only had this corner of the pitch, you could still put a goal here with the two players and still create the battle. It's just how you feed the ball in. So you can play it in. They could drop. Appreciate I haven't quartered this up, so don't slaughter me for that. Pull his man in, play the ball back. If he focuses on the ball and not the player, then he could make his run, maybe get a little ball through to finish. Within this, you could adapt it again like we did with the earlier skill. You could have a cutback person. So, for example, you play it in, he draws his defender, pulls it there, the ball's played for the cutback, and now it's a race between the two of them, which are battles that the centre forward would face about who can get there. Say the defender wins it and manages to play it out. Again, it could be from a cross. It could be the centre forward's decision. You play the ball in. If he gets turned, he's going to try and beat his man and shoot. If he can't do that, he's going to play it back, and the midfielder's going to play it wide, and then it's going to become a run for a cross again there. All little scenarios and battles that particular player will have on a day, that if we focus on those in training, then they will hopefully arrive on match day, not with a generic box of skills, but with ideas and scenarios they've got a little bit of knowledge of and that they can apply the skills to. And obviously it's not going to happen in one session. It would be done over a period of time. Again, if I had the younger age groups and the time or the space, I'd have all the boxes set out, and I'd be carouseling them round. You know, have a session, have 15 minutes as a forward, 15 minutes of a winger, 15 minutes in midfield. With older players, again, that are more positional specific, I'd just send them off to work in their areas on those particular battles. The next stage is the win the zone stage. So this is where we start to add players in and around the ball. I've made the box a little bit bigger just because of the size of my players on here, so it's a little bit easier to sort of see. And I've marked it out with the cones. You might use flats to quarter it up. So just bear with me on that one. I would have this practice where The Blues, who are attacking, it's centre forward and the two midfielders. Just if you're playing 4-3-3, for example. And then I would have a centre back against the forward and the two midfielders against the midfielders. We've got the quarters so that they can start to think about space. So again, we might look that this midfielder drops to receive off the defender, bounces it to this player, and the 9's recognise that this zone's open. So there's a little ball bounced in there. As he receives, 10 realises that that zone's open and makes the run to receive it back and break through and score. And that would be them winning the zone, because they've broken out the top of the zone and gone forwards towards goal. Obviously, they can play safe. It comes in, it's not on. They play it back and they just keep attacking. If the ball got played in, for example, 10 has a poor touch, 4 jumps on it, 4 would play it into there. That would be a goal for them. And then they'd just reset to marking as though the ball's now back with this player. Would be like a centre back, and they would play in there. Quarters to help with spacing. So if you're coming in, can you go in there? If that happens, maybe the 8's looking to exploit that one if the ball's coming in here. Little rotations. So say that 10 and 8 both come to the ball. 8 receives, takes his touch inside. That 10 might then run round to try and create a 2 versus 1 here, where the 8's chasing, but the 4 doesn't know whether or not to go to the ball, or if the 10 runs round and he reverses it, that might give him the option to go in there. But that's where the recognising a space comes in from the quarters. That if someone dribbles into yours, can you get out? Talked about principles for in here earlier. So there'd be 3 main principles. First one, try not to be in the same zone as a teammate. These are in possession principles. The second one would be, can we always have someone protecting the bottom? So if that little move happened where the 10's now running and the 9 and being chased, rather than run and get involved as the 8 would just drop in here in case it breaks down. He's trying to stop the opposition from playing forwards. So can we always have a safety net at the bottom, so to speak? The third principle comes from a book that I'm reading at the moment, and that's about trying to create 2v1s. So a lot of the time what happens in football is ball gets passed in. It's maybe the 10 doesn't necessarily see something's on. He plays to 8 and he might stand still. That to me is what I would call just passing on the 1v1. I couldn't win my 1v1. I've given it to you and I'm just going to stand and watch. What we want is movement to create 2v1s. And the way that's created is running once the ball's been played. So if the 10 receives here marked by 8 and plays into the 8 who comes to receive the ball, their player, if the 10 gets on the move ahead of their player, as they get to here, you're now creating a problem for this player. Does he stick with his player and ignore the runner, but his player might then play the 10 in? Or does he step because he thinks it's going to get played, in which case 8 might decide to go themselves? Another example of that could be the ball comes into 10, 9 shows, so he plays around the corner. If he just stands and watches, he's just passed the 1v1 on to the 9. What can the 9 do? If he starts to run and again gets an edge on his man, now the 5's got a problem. Stay with 9 and allow 9 to play 10 in, step to 10 and potentially 9 goes there. We've created a temporary 2v1 through that actual run on there. could we introduce, sorry, 8 could then drop in to do that one there, which would cover. If we wanted to get more complicated, we could look at this from a 3-player point of view, where the 2v1 comes from a different angle. So ball goes into 8, for example. 8 manages to turn. 9's there, the ball's rolled there, and it's 10 who's actually made the run off. So there's a potential to lay off, or if he steps to turn and go, and 8's covering there. So that'd be like a 3-player combination that we'd be looking at in there. That sort of movement would then allow you to coach defenders on marking, passing on, staying with your runner, and things like that. And the two would go together, where you could learn to win the zone offensively and defensively. But that would be the kind of principles we'd be looking for. So it would be to try and win the zone and get out the top, try and create 2v1s, always have a player protecting the bottom line, and in possession try and not be in the same zone as your teammates. If they come into your zone, move out into a different one. So you're creating confusion and rotation. Right, functions. So functions when we start to add the zones together and look at parts of the team. So a function here, we might look at playing through the centre of the pitch, trying to enter the goal zone from the top of the penalty area. 2 centre-backs, midfield 3, centre-forward, versus a goalkeeper, 2 centre-backs, 2 holding midfielders, a 10 and a 9. So it's 6v6 in here with the goalkeeper there. You could have a coach down here who's going to play the ball in, and then they play from there. The other thing that you could have is that the player comes in and dribbles it in from there, like that. Blues are trying to enter the penalty area, get a shot off. If the yellows win it, they're just trying to get into the end zone, like they've broke the line and got forwards. Okay, this now gives you the opportunity to get parts of the team working together and functioning together. The big thing it does is, whereas you might have had, say, a 3v2 in a zone, when you're working on the previous stage of winning the zone, you've now got the option that they can win the zone by playing to another zone. So say, for example, 9 presses 5, 4 drops across with 10, who plays a third man pass to 6. 6 could carry it in, or what they've got the option to do is play in and then allow them to play from there. So the ball's gone in there. So now what you're asking is, rather than the focus just being in the 20 by 20 around the ball, they're going to look to other areas of the pitch. Do you need to? So for example, if 9 can't get a pressure on and 9 and 10 drop a little bit, it could be that as 9 steps forward, they play at 5, 4 drops there, and there's a bit of a gap on, 8 showing, and 5 just plays straight in, and then they go and they play from there. Excuse me. And that's basically what we'd be looking at. So still practicing winning your zone, but now starting to look beyond your zone, and that's where the technique comes in, because now they're really going to have to be able to play with their head up and start taking in lots of information. To then go further to that, we can add 4 zones together, and we could have the right side versus the left side. So if we add in the right back, the left winger, the left back, and the right winger. And now what you get even more of, we'll just extend this end zone, because we had the same way for the yellows to get out. They break out into the zone. Now the blues have got 2 options: enter in the goal zone from the top, or can they get into a crossing zone and put a cross in? What you also will start to get more of now, again, is you're starting to get players to coordinate, but what you're going to end up with is that if they can't win that particular zone, say they've got nice and compact, then they might play to a different zone. And now you start to ask the question of who goes to play in that zone. So say the ball goes there, 11 comes across, 6 might come in this corner to support, and 4 might come over. 7 is working in here, and 8's starting to move into here now, which means 6 is having to cover sort of there. These guys may then come in, so we've got a little 3v3, and how is it working? 11 comes to press it, little ball there. These are just ideas. Plays there, drives in and creates a 3v3 in here, but as he drives in, potentially 7 runs in off the line. He goes to go around, and we're creating that 2v1 that we've talked about there, about getting into a crossing zone. Say they can't play, as often happens in games. If the 4's applying the principle of being at the bottom, it could well be that as he turns around and plays out here, because we can't play, he's then popping the ball in here. And then now again we're asking the question of who's coming in here to come and play. He might pop the ball in there and there. So you're starting to get the movement of the game now. Where do people need to be? Which zones are they playing in? You can start to work on those individual intentions. That, for example, if we go back to this example, 2 gets the run on 11 and he's coming in here. There, what are the intentions of these players? 8 may just hold his position here, might free that space up. 7 might try and draw 3 a little bit inside for a little 1-2, and what he's doing is he's improving the progress condition for 2. He's opening a space that where he can bounce it and he can get into that bit. So that's where those individual intentions come in. But now it's getting quite complicated, because not only have you got to think about team intention, individual intention, you've also got to think about where am I going to apply those intentions, and where am I needed. So this is getting to more advanced stuff. Obviously with younger kids, they play smaller formats, 5-a-side, 7-a-side, etc. 3v3 is coming. I would say the 3v3 work is great for the first 3 stages, where you work your technique, your 1v1s, and winning the zones, because that'll just be almost like 3v3 games. When you come to winning the zone, if you did it with like this, with an end zone at each end with a goal, and they're breaking into that, I think you get a lot of returns out of that. These functions, the smaller function, larger function, would be for when they get towards the bigger formats. I would sort of say 7v7 upwards, really, that this is the sort of work that they would do then. And finally, we come to the team stage, where it might be a phase of play. Again, there's an area for yellows to counter-attack into. Blues are looking at the different options. Do we get into a wide area? Do we get into the goal zone? Do we go and cross it in? Do we work our way in there? But now you're getting to the stage where players have really got to communicate and make decisions with each other. Again, it's all about when the ball goes into a zone, who's coming to play in that zone, what's their individual intention. We're always looking if we can get in behind the defence. We said earlier, if we can't, can we get in behind midfield? So it may well be that 2 clips it into 7, which gets us in behind the midfield. 7 gets turned, and our intention as a team is to get in behind. 7's dribbling inside. 9 makes a run to take a player with them, which is an individual intention of improving the progress option for 7, creating the space for them to go inside. 10 makes a blindside run on there. 5, for argument's sake, and that's an individual intention of trying to become a progress option. It's looking for the through ball so it can run on to score there. But the main part of this, and the main question we'd be asking, is which balls are zoning, who's going in that zone to do what, and who's staying away from that zone to do what. And from the other side, from the defensive point of view, if we just readjust it, push them back in there. Say the ball comes to 2, who plays to 7, 3 gets on to 7, and 4 and 6 are dropping across, trying to close off their options. 4's come to out, they're tightly marked, trying to trap them in there, and then forces a turnover. 11 breaks the line with 10, and they'd be out and moving up the pitch and score there. And again, from a defensive point of view, where's the ball? Which players are we sending in that zone? Are we even sending players in that zone? Is the distance too big for us to press? Are we going to drop to some deeper zones, let them come on to us and win it? But these are all things that the players can start to work on and to recognise and ask themselves simple questions. Can we put pressure on the ball? Who's going in there to press? Who's going in there to mark? Where can we close down space? Where can we show them? And just generally start to coordinate their actions. But having the zones of a bit of a reference as to whether it's in the centre of the pitch, the left or the right, to help them out a little bit. Obviously the zones aren't there on a match day, but one of the things you would hope, if you can train in the right sort of spaces, is that they will pick on the visual distances between each other and start to work from those, which will hopefully help them to coordinate their actions. So that's it. That's the basic outline of the 20 by 20 method. What we'll do over the next few weeks is we'll start putting down sessions that we would do. Say that we've got an hour and which age groups, which part of the process we'd work on. So with the younger age groups or beginners, you'd probably be looking at the technique, the 1v1, and a little bit on winning the zone as a game at the end, maybe. Intermediate players, building in functions, so you're starting to get parts of the team to work. And then with the more advanced players, you'd be looking to work in bigger scenarios. The more players on the pitch, the more information there is to work with, and the more you're stressing different things to work on. I've taken a player development model that's from Raymond Verheijen's work with FC Evolution. His 4-corner model is communication, decision-making, execution and fitness. Communication is trained in large number practices. It's where there's lots of information, and it's asking, do the players position themselves in the right place, and can they coordinate their actions with their teammates to achieve their objectives? So if you're observing somebody's communication in 11v11, you'd be looking at, are they playing in the right areas, and are they coordinating their action? They're not making the same run as somebody. If somebody makes a forward run and they need to cover for them, they cover for them, and things like that. Once you drop it down, the large number practice, would be sort of anything 8v8 to 11v11. Once you drop it down to 5v5 to 7v7, there's less people on the board, so the communication's easier. But what you would stress now is decision making, because there's still enough happening that you're going to have to choose between options. So again, if you were observing now, you would be thinking about, have they picked the best option? Have they recognised what options are available? And that's kind of things that we'd be looking at with that. If you then drop down from 5v5 to 4v4 or 3v3, then really we're looking at execution. Decision making is quite simple in those scenarios because there's not a lot of players on the pitch. So it gives you more repetition of executing a decision that you've made. The decision is the what am I going to do? And the execution is the how am I going to achieve it? And the execution, is the execution of the how, and did you actually achieve what you wanted to achieve? Fitness in the 4-corner approach is really simple. It's, can they maintain the quality and the quantity of their football actions for as long as possible? So somebody might be a high energy player but only last 20 minutes, and after that they're not tracking back anymore or closing space because they're tired. So it's not a disaster. It's something where you realise it and you're going to slowly try and push them up to, can they do 21 minutes? Can they do 25 minutes? Can they do half an hour? The fitness element is the least important. Communication's the most important. Can you play the game and recognise and understand the game? Then decision making. Can you pick out the choices within it and make good choices? And then the execution is, can you make sure that what you've decided to do, you actually do on a consistent basis? Fitness, again, would be for older kids right at the end, those that have gone through growth and maturation. You do maybe some lower level stuff with the kids, but really it's that sort of side of things would be for the older ones. So I would focus on the communication, decision making and execution when training with the younger groups for definite. That sort of ties it all together now. So you've got what the game is, the tasks within the game, team intentions, individual intentions, the idea of the zone, how that fits on the pitch, and then the stages of how we would try and teach it and progress it with the kids. If you want to see sessions and practices that we'll post over the coming weeks and months, then please subscribe and like and share. And if you've got any comments, always happy to talk coaching with anybody. So drop them in the comments and I'll answer them the best I can. Thank you.